Hey everybody, I'm Jason and this is Jay's Project Garage. This is the third video I've made today. Sorry about the wood furnace. When the thing really starts cranking, it like rattles and nothing I do changes it. Just the amount of air going in, combustion. Fire! Fire good. So today, well, in this video anyway, we're going to be talking about the piston flip thing, sort of. Now this video is just going to be me standing here talking about theory. My theory on what may actually be happening. Do I actually want to test it? I don't know. I don't really do a whole lot with stock parts. But it's a fun exercise, mental exercise for me to think about. But this is basically going to be a quick overview on how the engine works and what may be happening with the piston flip in different engines and different applications. Okay, so you may or may not know that after the intake stroke, when the piston gets to top dead center, and the spark plug, well, before top dead center, the spark plug lights, the piston starts heading back down. What was my point? Let's start over again. Hey everybody, just kidding. Okay. So a lot of guys will talk about how long the combustion takes place after the spark plug lights. I think that's where I was going with the last part of it. And I believe it's 40 or 45 degrees of crankshaft rotation at that air-fuel mixture ignition is actually exerting a force on the piston to push it down. And the rest of it is momentum. But one thing that I've never seen in a video, and that's something that, well, it's actually more than one thing, but it's something that I haven't heard anybody talk about. There's more going on than just that air-fuel charge. So, depending on camshaft timing and all that kind of stuff, obviously with racier stuff that really concentrates on cylinder filling, intake tracks and all that kind of stuff, those two valves are going to be open at the same time, momentarily. And like in the last video, well actually the video before, where we talked about scavenging with headers, where it's one primary is pulling the exhaust from another, it's actually drawing the exhaust out of the combustion chamber. And it's the momentum of the exhaust moving out that is drawing, it's creating a vacuum, pulling air and fuel out of the intake port. The exhaust valve closes, so that cylinder is already denser than it would have been without that overlap. The piston gets to bottom dead center, intake valve is still partially open. The momentum of the incoming air is continuing to pack that cylinder. So when the intake valve closes and the piston starts heading back up, right before it starts heading back up, that cylinder pressure is already higher than atmosphere. Just because of the effects of the vacuum, for lack of a better phrase. So that piston's already, or that cylinder's already at a higher pressure than atmosphere. Now the piston starts heading back up and you get ignition and it starts heading back down. When you heat something, it expands. So not only are you getting the forces of the ignition of the fuel pushing down on the piston, but you're also it's also trying to equalize to atmosphere. Okay, here's a thought. If you have a cylinder that's completely sealed and you insert a piston into the bottom that has an O-ring, and all you do is insert it, if you took your finger and you pushed that piston up to top dead center and you let it go, it would push itself back down because the pressures are trying to equalize. You're compressing air. So that alone is also pushing the piston down. It's not just combustion. Does that make sense? So you have multiple things that are pushing the piston down, and after the fuel is gone, the pressure inside the cylinder is still higher than atmosphere, and that is also pushing the piston down. Plus the inertia of the piston going down, and that's the momentum. So there is more at play than just the ignition of the air-fuel mixture. Does that make any sense at all? Okay, so that 40 degree, 45 degree thing where the air-fuel ignition is actually having a direct impact on the piston is only part of the story. And that may be for a specific kind of fuel and for a specific combination: camshaft, intake tract, exhaust tract, all that kind of stuff. So it's a kind of an arbitrary number. You change the fuel type, you start playing around with camshaft timing, efficiency of intake tract and exhaust tract and all that kind of stuff, and those degrees are going to change at a given RPM. Now, the burn rate of that fuel is going to be the burn rate of that fuel. It's going to take X amount of time for that amount of fuel to burn, which is why we advance timing. Because as RPMs increase, you have less time for that air and fuel to burn, even though its burn rate is unchanged. Right? So that 45 degrees will change with RPM, because things start happening really, really fast as RPMs increase. Now, if you do the math, at 7,000 RPM, how many times is that piston going to top dead center? How many combustion cycles are there at 7,000 RPMs? Even per second. Now, different fuels are going to burn at different rates. We talked about that a couple of videos ago. But for the average Joe in gasoline, that burn rate will be longer than it takes for that piston to get to 45 degrees. So as RPMs increase, is it having more of an effect longer? Well, not more of an effect, but is having an effect longer on that piston as it heads down. My thought on this whole piston flip thing is, if you change where the crankshaft thinks the piston is in one way or another, does the piston speed increase in the center of the bore, and is it going to have an effect on the amount of burn time, or the effect of the burn time on the piston? That's the big question. I don't know. I think the offset pin would absolutely make a difference if the intake and exhaust ports were a certain way and the camshaft was made a certain way to take advantage of the increased piston speed in the center of the stroke. Now, this is purely hypothetical because I don't know. But what we're going to do, maybe in the next video, is I'm going to take a piston, I'm going to put it in the normal way. I'm going to put a degree wheel on this thing. I'm going to find true top dead center. We're going to go through and we're going to measure where the piston is at different places in the stroke to see if it changes by flipping the piston. It obviously won't change anything at top dead center because the rod length is what the rod length is. And that's when the rod and the rod the rod journal on the crankshaft are at total 90 degrees to where the piston is at top dead center and bottom dead center. That's not going to change. But by changing where the crankshaft thinks the piston is in the center of the stroke, by changing the pin location and changing the angle of the rod, will that increase piston speed momentarily? And is that what actually has an effect on power output? But in the next video, I think the next video, that's what we're going to find out.